Turn to Romans chapter 11 just for a moment. I've got one more little passage to make this crystal clear. Paul takes up this same thought. Romans chapter 11, verse 13. Let's start with verse 13. Paul, writing to the Romans, chapter 11, verse 13. For I speak unto you Gentiles, for as much as I am the apostle to the Gentiles. Now why is he saying Gentiles? Well, the Gentiles under the Old Covenant were the outsiders. They were the people who were not part of the covenant. But they were the people, the Gentiles, the non-Jews, were the people who, for the most part, believed the message, the preaching of the apostles. They were the ones who, for the most part, believed. The nation of Israel in that day did not believe. So he's defining Gentile believers this way. I'm the apostle to the Gentiles. I magnify my office. He is the apostle to the Gentiles because Jesus sent him. When he appeared to him, he sent him. I said, I'm sending you to the Gentiles. That's basically, really, truthfully, that's you and me. And verse 14. If by any means I may provoke to emulation, that word means jealousy. Jealousy, those which are of my flesh, and might save some of them. Now who does he mean, those of his flesh? Well, those who are of the nation of Israel. Paul was an Israelite. Paul was of the nation of Israel. Paul was one of the small remnant, as he describes it, who did believe in Jesus. And he says, I want to magnify my office to you Gentiles who are believing in him, so I can provoke to jealousy those people who are physically related to me, of my flesh, he says, and provoke some of them to jealousy, because I want to provoke them to believe on Jesus just like I did. See, that's what he's saying. Verse 15. Listen. Connect this in your mind to what we read in John 15, because we're going to go back there in just a moment. If the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world, what shall be the receiving of them but life from the dead? For if the first fruit be holy, the lump is also holy. If the root be holy, so are the branches. And if some of the branches be broken off, listen, does this sound like the language Jesus used? Who is he talking about, the branches that are broken off? He's talking about national Israel, those who did not believe in Jesus. Those were his own, but they didn't believe in him. They're like branches broken off. He says, if some of the branches are broken off, and you, being a wild olive tree, are grafted in among them, and with them partake of the root and the fatness of the olive tree, that's Jesus, boast not against the branches. But if you boast, in other words, if you're going to boast, you bear not the root, but the root bears thee. In other words, if you want to boast about something, boast about Jesus. That's a good thing to boast. You don't have anything to boast about, but if you want to boast, let's boast about Jesus, how great he is. Verse 19. Thou wilt say, the branches were broken off that I might be grafted in. He's trying to warn them, don't be proud, don't be cocky, as we say. Don't be inflated with pride. Verse 20. Well, because, listen to this now. Because of what? Because of unbelief they were broken off. You see what makes the difference? Because of, he could have listed 1,000 things, but the thing that causes a person to be disconnected from Jesus is only one thing. Unbelief, they were broken off. And you stand by faith. What makes a person connected to Jesus? Faith. Faith in him, believing in him. We read it just a moment ago, John chapter 1. To everyone that received him, to them he gave the power to become the sons of God, even to those who believe on his name. We are believers in Jesus. The source of our life, our connection to him is based on one single thing, our faith in him. And people out here in the world who are not Christians, who are disconnected with him, the only thing that disconnects them from him is their unbelief. Does that make sense? And national Israel that he's referring to as branches broken off here, he said, here's why they're broken off, because he came to them, he came to his own, but his own received him not. And because of unbelief, they're broken off. So he says, don't be high-minded, but fear. For if God spared not the natural branches, take heed lest he spare not thee. But behold the goodness and severity of God on them which fell, that is those who didn't believe, severity. And listen now, it's pretty severe. We're going to read here in John again in just a moment. He says, branches that are broken off, here's what happens to them. They get bundled up in bundles and thrown into the fire. Now we don't even have to talk about hell. We can just talk about the physical reality. Did you know that in Jesus' lifetime, when he came to preach to them in Matthew's Gospel, he gave a message called the Olivet Discourse. And he said the temple, this temple here, is all going to be thrown down, not one stone left upon another. And he said, not only that, it's all going to take place within this generation. And did you know that that literally happened? That the Roman armies came and literally threw down that temple? Did you know if Jesus, time of his preaching was around about 30, 33 AD, which is the best we can guess, 40 years later, exactly one biblical generation, 40 years later, Roman armies came, devastated all of Judea, came to the temple, burned it, burned all the gold. Josephus tells us that the gold they started such a fire, it burned with such intense heat that the gold on which the temple was encrusted melted and went down into the cracks of the stones. And so the Roman soldiers, to recover the gold, pried the stones apart to get the gold out. They slaughtered everyone in the city. First they starved them. The people were starved. Josephus gives a graphic. You know, Josephus was an eyewitness to that. He was a Jew who, when the Romans came, he sort of was a traitor, you might say, to the Jews. And he switched sides and became... he was taken captive, so he said to the general that took him captive, "But you know, I'm an intelligent man. Let me write your history for you." And he wrote all these glowing reports, and the guy liked all the flattery, so he kept him. And Josephus wrote a history of it. You know, when these bundles of branches thrown into the fire, we could talk about hell if you want, but listen, people in his generation were in that kind of danger, and that's exactly what happened to them. So he says in verse 22, "Behold, therefore, the goodness and severity of God. On them which fell, severity. But towards thee," that means you, goodness. "Towards thee, goodness." Thee who? You believers. I'm tempted to have you say that out loud. Towards me, goodness. That's what that's what I want you to get from this. Now what makes the difference between you and them? It's not because you're so great and they're so bad. Listen, there's only one thing that makes a difference. It's whether you believe in Jesus or not. Everybody get that? Only one thing that makes a difference. And oh, what a difference it makes. It makes all the difference in the world. See, Jesus said it makes the difference between whether you have life in you and bear fruit, or whether he says, without me you can't do anything. Remember that? We're going to go read that in a minute. Upon them which fell, severity, but towards thee, goodness. I'd like you to highlight that. Towards me, goodness. That's his attitude. Why? Because you believe. You see, you obeyed. We were like that son who didn't do what was right at first, but then we did what he asked. And what he asks, what does he ask for us to do? He asks us to believe, see, accept his method of dealing with humanity, sending a Savior, sending Jesus. And not only, see, we sell it short sometimes. We think, well, you know, I'm going to believe in Jesus, now I can go to heaven when I die. It's not just that. It's not just a ticket out of hell. It's not just a passport into heaven. When you believe in Jesus, you have a new life on the inside. You're installed and plugged into the vine, and now God is able to bear fruit in this earth through you. He's the vine, we're the branches. Upon you, goodness, if you continue in his goodness. Well, I tell you, as far as I'm concerned, I can't understand why a person would not want to continue in his goodness. I don't understand a person who says, oh, well, you know, that's not for me. You know, I don't want that. Verse 23, he says, "And they also, if they abide not still in unbelief, shall be grafted in," for God's able to graft them in again. It's not like he's fed up and he's throwing anybody away, you know, and say, well, that's it for you. Jews, you can't be saved. It's not it at all. Anybody can be saved. What I say is, anybody can be a Christian, anybody can be saved, anybody can come to God, but there's only one avenue. Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." And there's not two ways, there's only one way. Everybody's got to come through Christ. Okay, let's go back to John chapter 15. Now, we've read a lot of scriptures from a lot of different places for the purpose of using the Bible's own language, using Paul and using Jesus, to help us understand what possibly he had in mind when he talked about two kinds of branches here. Verse 3, John 15, let's take it with verse 3. "Now you're clean." You ought to underline that. Now I'm clean. How did I get clean? Well, now you're clean through the word which I've spoken unto you. I think we read this earlier in Ephesians chapter 5. Paul says, washed by the washing water of the word. We're clean. Not because we said, I'm going to turn over a new leaf, tomorrow I'm going to do better, and I'm going to fix it up, I'm going to do this. Listen, who do you think you are anyway? We're just the branches. People, you know how people think. Me too, you know. I'm clean because of the word he's spoken to me, and I choose to believe the word he's spoken to me. And that word is a cleansing where it prunes. It has the effect of purging, cleaning, cleansing.